Every secure API has one thing in common: authentication. In this video, we'll build a secure authentication for your API using JWT Authentication that's ready for real-world production apps. There are a few videos out there on this topic, however, they are a bit old and in most cases suggest building JWT Authentication from scratch. This may not be a good idea for two reasons. First, building a secure production-ready authentication service from scratch is a lot of work. Second, there are services out there such as Auth0 or Cognito that you can leverage to offload most of the work. In this video, I'll show you how to use Cognito, my favorite identity provider, to create a robust and secure authentication for your API. We'll learn how to authenticate users, handle refresh tokens, secure routes, and manage permissions using scopes. And if at any point the code feels a bit overwhelming, feel free to check out complete guides for Node.js and JavaScript that I linked in the description below. They're great not only if you're just getting started, but also if you're an experienced developer looking to refresh your skills or fill in a few knowledge gaps. I am in Node.js Express API project. It is a simple API. Let's take a quick look what's under the hood. If you would like to dive deeper in how we built it, please check out my crash course on Node.js and Express from zero to API. And as usual, the link to all of this code will be in the description below. The main code of this project is in src server.cs file. Here we create an Express app. Next we have two middlewares, Cors and Morgan. Cors middleware allows us to accept cross-origin requests, and Morgan middleware allows us to log the requests. Next we have Express JSON middleware. This middleware allows us to parse JSON body of the request. Next we have tasks routes implemented by the task router. Let's take a quick look at it. In the routes folder in a tasks.ts file, we have our task routes. First, we create and export the task router, and then we have a get method to display all the tasks or search tasks. Next, we have get method to get a task by ID. Then we have a post method to create tasks, put to update task, and then delete to delete the task. So as you can see, we basically have a full CRUD for our tasks. Back in the server.ts file, we next have error handler middleware. This is simple middleware that handles our errors before they get passed to Express built-in error handling middleware. The code for this middleware is in the middleware folder in errorhandler.ts file. The code here is very simple. We first check if the response header is already sent, meaning the response is sent. If so, we'll just pass the error to Express built-in error handler and return. However, if the request is not sent, then we have the custom handling of our error. We basically get error message and we respond back to the user with a status 500. After we send this error response, we pass the error to Express built-in error handler because it does a good job logging the error. This error handling middleware can be used for both unhandled and handled errors. If there is an unhandled error, it ends up here. However, if we have a handled error, we can also pass it in here, so we can just get error message from that error and don't repeat our code in the routes. Back in server.ts file, we export default the app. This app gets imported in index.ts file. We assign the port that we get from the env variable port. And next we call listen method on the app and we pass to it port and the callback function that console logs Express is running on the port, message to the console. Now let's take a look at the package.json file. We have three scripts over here: build, start, and dev. And since it is a TypeScript application, so we have to first build it. We do it with a TSC, and then we run it by calling node-dist-index.js file. Let's take a look at tsconfig.json file, and here we can see that our output directory is the dist and the root directory is a source, so the files from the source directory are built in the dist directory. Next, in the package.json file, we have the dev script. This script is basically runs automation for us. It watches for the changes in the TypeScript files, and when they successfully are rebuilt, it calls index.js file from the dist directory. We're also using .env right here, which is actually a .env CLI package. So this package lets us load environment variables from the .env file. And if we go to .env file, we can see that we currently have two environment variables, node env and the port. We will add some more environment variables to this file. Finally, we can go ahead and test our API. I have here API test.htp file. This file ultimately acts as API client that is very similar to Postman. And the VS Code plugin that allows me to do that is called REST Client. So if you don't have it installed in your VS Code, you can install it and then use the .htp file to test your API. So let's go ahead and do just that. Let's spin up the dev server with npm run dev. The server is running on port 3000. Let's go ahead and make a request to list the tasks. And we can see we got the tasks back, or we can get a task by ID. You can see we have the task by ID of 2. And we can also create or update the task. So this is basically the API that we're going to be protecting using authentication and Cognito Identity Provider. Before we do that, we will need to set up Cognito. So let's go into AWS console, and I'm here in the Amazon Cognito section. So let's go ahead and create a user pool. Before, it used to be a little bit of work to create user pool and configure the application, but nowadays they streamline the flow. So in the first step, we define your application. Since we are going to be using AWS SDK, right? We're going to choose mobile app here that allows us to use the SDK. Next, they're asking to name the application. This will be not the user pool name, but the application name that we're going to be communicating to. So let's go ahead and name it API Authentication. Next, we have configure options, and those are options for sign-in identities, right? We're going to be choosing email. You can also choose phone number or username, or all three of those. Next, there is the self-registration section. We're actually going to disable the self-registration, so we will register our users through our API using SDK. For required attributes for sign up, we can just choose email, and we can choose name right here. Next, we have return URL, which we will leave empty, and we will click create user directory. We are redirected to the page that shows us how to do a quick setup. But we're going to scroll all the way down and click go to overview. As you can see, Cognito user pool has a lot of options. I go through all of these options in my video, Amazon Cognito user pools made easy, setup and settings you must know. Please check it out if you would like to learn more about Amazon Cognito. For now, we will just do a couple of things. We will first rename the user pool, so the name is a little more descriptive than we have. It will be API JWT Authentication. And another thing that we are going to do is we're going to go to API Client. We'll click on API Authentication Client. Here we click Edit this client. And in authentication flows, we also will check sign in with username and password. Besides authentication flows options, another options that you can adjust and that are useful are token expiration options. You have refresh token expiration, access token expiration, and ID token expiration. In our case, refresh token expires in 5 days, and access and ID tokens expire in 60 minutes or 1 hour. Let's scroll down and click Save Changes. We are all set. All we need to do now is to add environment variables to our project. So let's go to .env file, and we will need the following environment variables: AWS region, Cognito client ID, and Cognito user pool ID. I am in US West 2 region, so you're gonna adjust your AWS region accordingly here. Let's go back to Cognito. Here we are still in the app client, so we can copy the client ID right here and then switch back to our VS Code and paste the client ID. Next, let's get Cognito user pool ID. So we're going to switch back to Cognito. We'll just click on top here, the name of our Cognito user pool. And then we have a user pool ID right over here. We'll copy that. We're going to switch back to Visual Studio Code, and in a .env file, we paste Cognito user pool ID. Now, all we have to do is to use AWS JavaScript SDK to communicate to our Cognito user pool and Cognito. But before we do that, let me show you the documentation for JavaScript SDK. So here I am on the site docs.aws.amazon.com. Just need to scroll down here to all products and just type JavaScript. And now you can find the AWS SDK for JavaScript, so you can click on it. So now you have the latest version is version 3 currently. You have developer guides that you want to check right here. There's some useful information here. However, we'll just jump straight into the API reference. In the API references, we're going to be using Cognito Identity Provider on the left-hand side. I started, so it is saved as my preference. However, if you don't have it, you'll have to just scroll down here. They're all in alphabetical order, so you can find Cognito Identity Provider. And then when you click on it, you're going to have Cognito Identity Provider client documentation. This documentation tells you how to install AWS SDK Client Cognito Identity Provider Library, and then you have also Cognito Identity Provider Client operations. You can basically look through the list what operations are available, or you can search for specific operation. For example, we will need to be able to sign up user, so you can search for sign up command. You can see the results for sign up, and if we scroll down, we're going to have this sign up command. And when we click on it, you're going to have the example of the syntax of how to use the command. And then you also have the output, right? The response that you get when you call this command. This is pretty useful. And then down below, you have a sign up command input and then sign up command output and what exceptions the command throws. This is very helpful as well. If you want to, for example, log in a user, you actually need to search for initiate auth command. And this right here, we have admin, initiate auth command, or initiate auth command. You can click on initiate auth command, and again, you will see the syntax of how to use the command, example of usage, and input, output, and the exceptions that this command throws. And this is how you can use Cognito SDK documentation. So what we would need to do now is to actually install AWS SDK Client Cognito Identity Provider. Let's go ahead and copy it here. Back in the Visual Code, let's open the terminal here and simply paste the npm command to install the SDK. The SDK is installed. Now we can create the code. Before we do that, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. In the SRC folder, in the routes folder, we're going to create another file called auth.cs. So in this file, we will have our authentication routes. Let me go ahead and paste the code in this file, and I will explain it to you. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way up. There's a little bit of code, and we're going to go through this. First, we're going to import Express from Express to create our auth router right over here. The next, we're going to import all the commands that we will need to sign up user, to confirm sign up, to initiate auth command, or in other words, log in user, and to sign out user. So we're going to import all these commands from AWS SDK Client Cognito Identity Provider. Next, we're going to be instantiating Cognito Identity Provider client, and in the options configuration, we only pass the region, and we're going to take this region from the env variable or put US East 1 default. Then, as I mentioned already, we're going to create auth router by calling router method on Express. Now we're all set to create authentication routes, and the first route will be sign up. It will be a post route, and we're going to be distracting email, password, and name from the request body. Then we're going to be instantiating a sign up command. This sign up command will require the client ID, which we're going to use Cognito client ID from the environment variable, username, and a password. And then we also said that the name of the user will be a required attribute, so we'll put it in user attributes with the name of name, no pun intended, and the value of the name. And then again, we're going to also create an email attribute with a value of email. Next, we're going to call send method on the client and pass it the command. If everything goes well, we will send a JSON response to the user with a message user registration successful, and then we're going to send also the user ID, which is a user sub property on the response. If things go not so well, we will catch an error and pass it to our error handler. And so we don't forget, error handler middleware will catch it, and then it will respond with a JSON response with an error and the message, and it will extract the message from the error that we will pass to this error handler. The next route will be confirm. When we create a user in a Cognito, we will need to verify their email. So the confirmation code will be sent to that email. So we're going to distract email and confirmation code from the request body. We will instantiate confirm sign up command. Again, we're going to pass a client ID, username, which is our email, and the confirmation code.
Next, we're going to use send method on the client to send this command, and if everything goes well, we will respond to the user with a message email confirmed successfully. Next, we're going to create a login route. So we will need email and password to log in the user. We'll get it from the request body. We initiate auth command, and we're going to specify the auth flow, which is user password auth that we enabled, if you remember earlier. So, and then we'll also put the client ID, Cognito client ID right here. And then auth parameters will be username, email, and password will be the password. We're going to send the command, and if everything goes well, we'll receive the response, and there will be authentication result on this response, which we assign to tokens. If for some reason the authentication result is empty, we will console log full response. And we also will throw an error with a message, no authentication tokens received. Please check user password auth is enabled in your Cognito user pool client settings, because this may be one of the reasons why we did not get authentication result. We're not going to be handling this error in the auth.ts file, and this error will get handled again in our error handler, and we will extract the error message from the error and return it to the user. However, if we get authentication result, we're going to send the message login successful, and we will extract access, refresh, ID, and expires in from the authentication result, or rather tokens that we assigned it to, and send it to the user. Next, we are going to create a logout route. In order to log out, we will need access token. We will get it from the authorization header right here. We will get the authorization header from reg.headers.authorization. And if there is no auth header, we will return status 401, access token is required. If there is access token, we will replace bearer, because it's going to be prefixed with the word bearer and space. We will replace it with an empty string, right? So we only get the token. We will instantiate new global sign out command and pass it access token. Then we're going to send this command, and if everything goes well, we will send the message back to the user, log out successful. Finally, we're going to create a token route. The access token is short-lived. However, we also have a refresh token that is long-lived, and we can use it to request access token when this access token expires or about to expire. And what we're going to be using is the token route for it. So from the request body, we're going to get the refresh token, and if there is no refresh token, right, we're going to return the response to the user that refresh token is required. However, if we have a refresh token, we will initiate auth command. Now auth flow will be a refresh token auth, and then we also pass the client ID, Cognito client ID right over here, and then in the auth parameters, we'll just specify a refresh token. Next, we're going to send the command, and if everything goes well, we will assign response authentication result to tokens. And again, we'll check if there's no tokens, we'll throw an error, no authentication tokens received. This error will be handled in the error handler. However, if we get successful result, we will send the message token refresh successful, and then we return the tokens back to the user. Again, access token, ID token. There will be no refresh token because user already has the refresh token, and expires in. And these are basically all the authentication routes that we will need for our application. Next, we will go to the server.ts file, and we are going to import the auth router, and we will add it to the routes that we already have, right, by calling .use method and passing in /auth route prefix and the auth router. Let's go to API test.http file, and at the very top, we can add the sign up request. We will make a post request to localhost 3000 auth sign up route. The content type header will be application JSON, and we'll pass the name, the email, and the password right here. Let's go ahead and spin up the application with the npm run dev. We got a message that expresses running on port 3000. Let's go ahead and make the request. And it looks like we received an error. Sign up is not permitted for this user pool. And this is my mistake, because when we created a user pool, we unchecked the allow register option, and I thought it applies only to the hosted UI or managed UI. However, it looks like it also applies when you are using SDK. Let's go back to Amazon Cognito. Here on the left-hand side, we have the sign up option. So let's click on that. And then we have right here the card at the very bottom, self-service sign up. Let's click edit and then check enable self-registration and save the changes. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code and make the request again. And now we got a message that user registration is successful and we got the user ID. The next thing that we will need to do is to confirm the email I used from temp mail. So I should receive a confirmation code at this email. Let's go ahead and check it. Okay, and when we switch to temp mail, we can see that we got our verification code. Let's click on it. Let's go ahead and copy it. Now we can switch back to Visual Studio Code, and here we can basically paste the confirmation code and make the request. And we got the message back that email confirmed successfully. Next, let's create the remaining requests, which will be login, refresh token, and logout requests, so we can test these operations. When we send a login request, we can see that the user got logged in and we received access token, refresh token, ID token, and expires in. So what we are interested here is refresh token actually, right? So we're gonna test our route if we can get another access token using the refresh token. Let's go ahead and copy this request token. Now we can paste it in the refresh token right here. Now we can make the request to get another access token using this refresh token. Let's see if it works. And looks like request worked. So we got access token, ID token, and again expires in, and we do not have the refresh token anymore. So let's go ahead and grab this access token. Now we can put the access token in the authorization header bearer of the logout request. So let's do just that and check if the logout route works. And it does work. The user got logged out successfully, so now this refresh token should be invalid. And let's go ahead and send the request. And yes, we got the message that refresh token has been revoked. And this is all it takes to create authentication routes for our API. Since we're backed by Cognito, Cognito did the heavy lifting for us, and creating these authentication routes was easy and fast. Now that we know how to get access token, we can secure our API using this access token. The way we're going to do it is by creating auth middleware, and in this middleware we will be verifying the token. If the token is valid and it's not expired, we will allow access to the specific routes for the user. However, if this token is invalid or expired, obviously we will be returning for one unauthorized error. AWS has documentation on how to properly verify JWT tokens, so we can take a look at this, and it has a lot of information here and what steps you need to take to verify and validate the token properly. However, we're going to be using AWS JWT Verify library that we're going to be installing, and this library will do all this heavy lifting for us. Let's go ahead and switch to Visual Studio Code and install this library. We will do npm install, and we're going to do AWS JWT Verify. The library is installed. Let's create a middleware that will be using this library. In the middleware folder in src, let's create a new file. It will be called auth.ts. And here we're going to place our authentication middleware. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the code. We're going to be importing request response and next function types from Express, and Cognito JWT verifier from AWS JWT Verify. Next, we're going to be creating a verifier using Cognito JWT verifier create method. We're going to pass user pool ID, which will be Cognito user pool ID. Token use will be access, and we also pass the client ID, which is Cognito client ID in our environment variables. Next, we're going to export function auth middleware. Will be an async function. It will take request, response, and next. We will attempt to get the authentication header from the headers of the request, and the header name is authorization. And if there is no authentication header, we will respond with a status 401 and message authorization header is missing. However, if we do have authorization header, we will try to get a token from this authorization header by replacing bearer and space with an empty string. So we're going to just extract the token. Next, we're going to have a try-catch block, and in this try-catch block, we will attempt to verify the token. And if the verification is successful, we will create a user and add it to request, and we'll put the ID, and this ID will be the sub property from the payload. Email, it will be a property email from the payload, and name will be property name from the payload. This user object on the request can come pretty handy. For example, if you have a multi-tenant application, right, you can use the user ID to fetch that specific user's tasks, and then email and also name can be used to do some other verifications. After the token is successfully verified, we'll just call next to basically pass the request to other route handlers. However, if we have an error, right, the token did not verify correctly, we will catch that error and respond to the user with a status 401 invalid or expired token. And then finally, we will also have the catch statement for our general middleware, right? If something else goes wrong, we will get the error and pass it to our error handler using the next function. As you may have noticed, we have a bit of a problem here. TypeScript is complaining because the user object really does not exist on the request, and the request is actually a type of request coming from the express. So what we need to do is to extend this request so we can have a user type on it. So let's go ahead and do just that. In the src folder, let's create a new file, and it will be the types file, so we'll call it express.d.ts. In this file, we're going to put the following code. We're going to import express, and then we'll declare global. We'll have namespace express, and then we're going to be extending the request interface by adding optional user object, right, with a ID, email, and name properties. Our middleware is set. Let's go ahead and use it to protect our routes. We're going to go to folder routes, right, tasks.ts file, and let's go ahead and import this middleware first. Now, let's say we can allow any users to view the tasks, right? So the get tasks and the get task by ID will not be protected. However, in order to create a task, update a task, or delete a task, the user needs to be authenticated. So to do that, we just need to put our middleware right before the task router post, right? And then it's going to apply to put and to delete as well. So let's do just that. We can apply the auth middleware by calling method use on the task router and passing to it our auth middleware. Now all the routes that are below this line will be protected by the middleware. All right, let's go ahead and test our code. Let's spin up the application with npm run dev. Next, let's go to api.test.htp file. Here we need to log into the API, right, or application. Let's go ahead and send the login request. And we got our access token, refresh token, and ID token, but we're interested in the access token. Let's go ahead and copy this access token. We're going to scroll all the way down, and then we're going to apply it to the create a new task, right, and then update a task, right. We need to pass this token in the authorization header, right. So what we're going to do, we're going to type a new header, authorization, and then we'll put the word bearer, and then we'll paste the token. All right, so now we can make a request to create a new task using this token. Let's try first actually the route to get a task by ID, or just get tasks, right, list tasks, and we can see that those routes are unprotected, so we can easily get them, right? However, the route to create a new task or update a task, they are protected. Let's try the update a task route. So we don't have the access token here, so we should be unauthorized, right? Authorization header is missing. However, if we go and try to create a task, we're going to send the request, and you can see that the task was successfully created. Now, if we tamper with this token in any way, maybe put a different letter instead of Q, we can put A and make the request again. We can see that now we have an error message that the token is invalid or expired. And this is how you can secure your routes with Amazon Cognito access token. The authentication with access token that we created is great. However, it works more like on and off switch, right? Whether if we have a authentication access token, it works. However, if we don't, right, the user cannot access the routes. But what if we want to make our authentication more granular, right? Maybe we have two types of users, regular users and the admins, and the regular users can see the tasks, right? Search tasks and, get task by ID, for example, and maybe update a task in case they would like to mark the task completed, right? But the admins of this application will be able to create a new task, right? And delete that task as well. So in terms of JWT tokens, right, we can achieve this with the scopes. Let's go to JWT.io website and paste our access token right here. And you can see that the decoded payload contains all the properties. They're called claims actually. And right here we have a scope claim, right? So we can see it right here. And currently we only have one default scope, AWS, the Cognito, the sign-in user admin. But what we can do actually is to add more scopes to it. For example, the regular users of our application may have two scopes, tasks read and tasks update. And then the admins of the application, right, they can use all four scopes, right? Tasks read, tasks update, task create, and tasks delete, right? And then depending on the scopes, we will authorize the specific routes, right? When we apply middleware, we will pass the scope that's needed for the specific route, and then middleware will check specifically if the token will contain that scope. So basically, after user logs in, we need to check whether this user is a regular user or an admin, and then add the scopes to this scope claim so the user can access the tasks routes that they can actually access. So let's go ahead and implement that. Let's go to Amazon Cognito, and first what we'll need to do is to add a custom property that we can call role. Let's go to user management and click on users. Here we have the user. We can actually click on this user and we can click on edit. And right here, we have additional attributes, right? So the place where we can configure those additional attributes is actually sign up experience. So let's click on this link to the sign up experience. And then right here, we have custom attribute. We can add custom attributes. So let's go ahead and click on that and add our custom attribute that is going to be called role. Let's go ahead and enter name, role. This attribute will be a type of string, and the minimum we can set maybe 2 and maximum 255, right? Those are optionals, and we also check it to be mutable, so we can change this role. So let's go ahead and click Save Changes. Now we can go back to our users, click on this user, click Edit this user, and now we have optional attributes, right here. We can click Add Attributes, and we can find a role attribute. And then you can see that the custom attributes are prefixed with a custom and colon. So let's select this, and the value for this custom role, for now, we can just specify as user. And let's go ahead and click Save Changes. Now our user has a custom attribute called custom colon role with a value of user. The way we're going to determine what scopes the user is going to have is actually going to be a Lambda function. So after user logs in, the Lambda will fire and it will check this property, whether it's a user or admin, and then we'll assign the scopes to that token. So essentially it's going to be modifying the access token. So let's go ahead and create that Lambda. So we need to go to Authentication section, Extensions, and we click on Add Lambda Trigger. So those lambdas that are modifying, the tokens or other things after, there are certain Cognito actions, they're called Lambda triggers. So let's create one. We're going to select the trigger type as authentication, and then we will be pre-token generation trigger, right? We're going to select that. And then we have a trigger event version. It actually selects the latest or the last one, right, which will apply to M2M tokens as well, or M2M is machine-to-machine tokens, right? You can modify that with this version. However, we basically need the second one, right? The basic features plus access token customization for user identities, because we're going to be modifying the custom token, because we're going to be modifying the access token. Next, we need to select the Lambda function, right? We already have a few Lambda functions. However, let's create a new Lambda function. We're going to click Create Function button right here. We will author our function from scratch. We'll give it a name. We'll call it API JWT Authentication Scopes Lambda. We'll use the latest node version, which is 22. Currently, actually, long-term support is 24. However, here, a Lambda function, they still haven't updated it yet, so the latest you can use is Node.js 22. It's going to be sufficient for us. We'll be using 8664 architecture, and everything else we just leave the same, and we're going to click on Create Function. Let's go ahead and update the function. We're going to change index.mjs file. So we put the following code in here. We're going to have the handler, right, which it will be an async function that we're going to be exporting. We're going to get the user attributes, and this attribute is going to come from this event, right? The Cognito will pass a specific event. Event will have a request, and user attributes. We'll grab that user attributes. We will also define the base scopes. So, and there will be just tasks read and tasks update. That's what regular users can do. And then we'll check if user attributes contain custom role and this role equals to admin, we will update the scopes. We'll push 2 additional scopes. It will be tasks create and tasks delete. Now we're going to have a response, right? We'll just add it to the event and it will be event.response. And we're going to make sure, since we're using version 2, this response should be in the shape of version 2 for pre-token generation. So what we're going to have on this response, there is a claims scope override details, right? This is ID token generation. We will leave it as it is. However, the access token generation, right? We're going to update the scopes. We'll have a property scopes to add, and we'll add our scopes. And then we're going to return the event. So this code is fairly simple. However, if you want to modify other properties, you can check the documentation on pre-token generation Lambda trigger. Right? It's going to explain to you all the different versions of this trigger and how to customize identity tokens and access tokens. But in our case, we have a pretty simple code right here. All we have to do is click on this deploy right here. And now our Lambda has been deployed. Great. Now we can go back to our Cognito, right? Click refresh right here. And now this Lambda should show up in a drop-down. Here we have it, JWT Authentication Scopes Lambda. Let's go ahead and select it, right? And we also have this notice that permissions to invoke Lambda function will be granted to Amazon Cognito. Let's go ahead and click Add Lambda Trigger. Great. Our trigger has been created successfully. So let's go ahead and test it. Back in Visual Studio Code, we need to go ahead and log in again so we can see if we can get those scopes, right? Again, we got the access token. We're going to copy this token and then we're going to head to jwt.io. So let's go ahead and paste that token and see if we got more scopes. And as you can see, we did get additional scopes, right? We still have AWS Cognito admin user. However, we also have tasks read and tasks update because this token is for the user and the user can only view the tasks and update the tasks, maybe mark them as completed. Now, all we have to do is to update our middleware so it checks for the scopes and then attach this middleware to all the tasks routes. Let's do just that. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio Code and we can go ahead and close this and head to auth.cs middleware and let's make some updates here. In the auth middleware, we're going to put the following updated code. So let's go ahead and check what it does. So we basically, again, import request response and next function types, right? We create the Cognito verifier. However, now auth middleware actually changed a little bit, right? Instead of taking request, response, and next, it actually takes the required scopes, which will be an array of strings, right? And then it returns this async function. So our auth middleware is a higher order function, meaning it just returns another function. So what it does, it returns the actual middleware function where we have request, response, and next. And the reason for that is that we need to have access to these required scopes. In this new middleware function, we're going to first check, authentication header. So if it doesn't exist, as usual, we will return authorization header is missing. However, if we get auth header and we get the token, we're going to attempt to verify the token. And if everything is good, we will extract the token scopes, right? We'll just basically get the property scopes on the payload, as a string. We will split them. So we're going to have the array of scopes. Now, if we have required scopes, right, we're going to be checking, right, if the scopes in the payload include, those required scopes, right? And if it doesn't have required scopes, we will return insufficient permission and required scopes, and we will return what scopes are required. But if we do, we'll just do business as usual. We're going to have this user object, we'll attach it to request, and we also add the scopes property right here. It's not typed yet, we're going to type it in a second, and then we'll just call the function next, right? And again, if there's something happens during token validation, we will send an error message, invalid or expired token. And at the end, if anything else happens, we'll catch an error and pass it to the error handler. So now let's go ahead and add the scopes property to our type, right, to the extension of the express request. So we can put another type that will be an array of strings or an array of our scopes, and we'll have property scopes. Now let's go ahead and apply the auth middleware with the scopes to the tasks routes, right? So let's go to routes tasks.ts file. We can remove auth middleware from right here. And what we are going to do is to apply this auth middleware to all the routes. Let's go ahead and place it as kind of the middle argument into the route handler function. So we can do auth middleware and will be tasks read, right? Because it's a get request. All right, let's go ahead and add this middleware to the more routes. So this is going to be also tasks read get task by ID. And we're going to put the post. For creating a task, we will need the scope tasks create. For updating the tasks, right, we will need the scope tasks update. And finally, for deleting the post, we will need the scope tasks delete. We're all set. Let's go ahead and check our code. Let's head in the API test.http file, and right here go to our tasks routes. And then we have the list tasks right here. So let's attach the token, right? We're going to put authorization and will be word bearer. And then we'll put the token in here. So let's try to make a request, right, to get the tasks. And as you can see, it is working, so we can get the tasks. However, if we go and use this token to create a task, right, we should not have these permissions. Let's go ahead and put this token in here and make a request to create a new task. And as you can see, we got the message insufficient permissions, required scopes, tasks create. And our token does not have the scope tasks create. Now what we can do is to head back into the Cognito, right? We can click on the users, click on our user right here, right, and click on edit. Now we can see that we have this custom role, we have user. Let's go ahead and put it as admin and go ahead and save our changes. We're going to head back to Visual Studio Code. So now what we will need to do is to re-log in. Let's go ahead and do just that. Our user successfully logged in. Let's copy the access token. Now this token should contain all the necessary scopes. Let's go to the browser and go to JWT.io verify. Let's paste this new token in here. And now you can see that token contains all the scopes that we need, right? Tasks read, tasks create, tasks update, and tasks delete. And now if we go back to Visual Studio Code and we gonna go ahead and use this token, right? We want to update or create our task. Let's paste this new token in here instead of the old one, and we'll send the request. And as you can see, now it is working. So we are able to create a task because our user is admin and we have enough scopes, or rather permissions. And that's all there is to implementing secure JWT authentication in Node.js and Express using Amazon Cognito. If you want to take your skills further, check out my course, Node.js REST API Mastery, Build Powerful APIs with Express, where we build a complete production-ready API step by step.